Okay, I am on my way right now to drive to Sheridan, Wyoming, which is about an 8.5-hour drive one way. I've been trying to find a very particular utility vehicle that will allow me to get to the cabin in the middle of winter, regardless of how much snow we might have on the ground. And it's a long drive, 17 hours round trip. I'm gonna try and do straight through, maybe sleep on the road as I need to. But I've been putting it off for a week. I've been talking with the guy for a week. I got to get it done. I'm kind of looking forward to see what that side of Wyoming looks like. I've never been to that side of Wyoming, but it's going to be a long drive, and I hope it fits in the back of my truck because I'm not pulling a trailer. So here we go. A little later on in the video, I will go into more detail about what happened at our local rodeo when the bull made an effort to jump over the fence into the crowd. Thank you to our friend Shari for letting us use her video that I showed at the beginning of this video. I've been trying to find a very particular tracked vehicle that I'm hoping will make it up to our cabin regardless of how much snow that we get. I've had my eyes on a very particular style and even a brand for nearly 2 years, and this one is the closest one that I've been able to find for a reasonable price, and it's a weak excuse to take a drive and go pick it up. Over the last few years, I've gone to western Wyoming a number of times, but I've never been this far east. And there's one particular small town that I hope to drive through on my way to Sheridan. All right, I just went 190 miles between gas stations. The last gas station I saw, I topped off at. And the next one I just came to is in a town called, I can't even remember. But I'm about halfway to Sheridan. So, truck's running good. I'm gonna keep grinding. Naturally, the trip took a little bit longer than I thought it would, but the end result is I made it to my destination without any issues. The old Dodge truck functioned perfectly. And the only real concern that I had was the distance between gas stations once you get away from these small towns. The Cushman Trackster barely fit into the back of my truck.
All right, have a safe trip. Watch out for you.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks again.
Yep, you bet.
Take care.
Enjoy.
We had to remove a few bolts to make it fit right, but we got it in.
I laid 2 bits on the counter. The knife was on me. I said, I'd appreciate it if you did.
I really didn't want to tow my trailer that far empty, and thank goodness it all worked out. All right, I made it home, over 1,000 miles in less than probably 16 hours, 17 hours, something like that. Only had one minor issue, and that was a Brief conversation with a Wyoming highway patrolman after my running lights weren't working quite right, but the old Dodge got it done. I've had 2 hours of sleep in the last couple of days, so I'm wrecked. But the next step is to get this thing down and see how well it can get up to the cabin. So this one's a 1972. It only has like 340 hours on it. It's all original, still has the original 2-stroke engine in it. I think they're either 26 horsepower or 29 horsepower engines. They're stinky 2-strokes and they're loud. A lot of guys convert these things over to either a 20, probably the most common one is a Honda, 24 horse Honda V-twin, which I think I'm gonna probably do. The downside is that a Honda motor is not a cheap motor, but it's quiet, it's more quiet, and you don't have that cloud of 2-stroke exhaust everywhere you go. The tracks on it are a little bit dry rotted and cracked, and once we get our first snow, the plan is once we get our first snow is I'm just going to keep a path open all the way to the cabin. That's my goal, is to be able to get up there no matter how much snow we have. The only concern that I do have is as the snow gets deeper, whether or not this motor is going to be able to keep up with it. So I may start looking for one of those Honda 24 horse motors, but pretty fun little unique rig. They made them for 2 years, I believe, 71 and 72, and then they discontinued them because they're notorious for flipping over. They're fast enough that when you stop on that, when you pull back on the hydraulics and stop it, if you were going downhill, it would probably roll. So I'm going to need to build a roll bar of sorts, and maybe even find a canopy or something to go over it. Now I'm going to try to get it up to the cabin just like it is. So this is Cedar's video that she took of the bull that would end up jumping over the fence. She turned her phone off seconds before the bull did what it did. But let me talk about a few things here. This bull is doing what it's supposed to do. In my opinion, the only issue is the fact that the wall around this side of the arena is too low. And this simply confirms that the town needs to spend the money to raise it up higher like they did on the other side. These bulls and horses that are used in the rodeo life are oftentimes incredibly valuable animals. They're not abused, they're not mistreated, and there's most certainly nothing tied to its genitals to make it buck. They are happy to buck with nothing on them. There is a girth strap that's used that puts a little bit of pressure on their flanks that encourages the bucking, but at the end of the day, thank goodness nobody got hurt. There's a good chance that later in the week we're going to have some pretty bad weather come in, and I hope to be on the roof by then. So I got to get the fence done hopefully in the next 2 to 3 days at most. Once the goats are moved up here and I don't have to think about them or worry about them as much, then I can focus on the roof again. Before I start setting T-posts, or I'm sorry, poles, those treated 4x4 poles, I want to hit the ridge of where the fence is going to sit with the weed eater, so I'm not fighting the weeds. There's some vines in there. There's some things in there that I just don't want to be in conflict with. So real quickly, I'm going to walk down with the edger, knock all the weeds down. Then I'm gonna do my dangest to get the post set today. This little ridge right here by this big huge Doug fir, probably my favorite tree on our whole property. This little ridge doesn't have anywhere near as much topsoil, so there's way more rock. So trying to get posts set in this is going to be fun. If I was using T-posts, it would be much easier, but and I may actually have to switch to T-posts at some point in time. But anyway, I'm going to edge this real quick and start setting posts. When I was driving over to Sheridan, Wyoming, I drove through a town called KC, Wyoming, which is the home of the late and great Chris Ledoux. If I recall correctly, the population is under 100 people. This is where his family ranch still is to this day. I listened to more Chris Ledoux CDs between the ages of about 18 and 21, and I still don't know why one of my sons didn't end up with that name, KC. But we did end up with a Sage and a Cheyenne, and I'm sure I was heavily influenced by the music that I was listening to at that time. The farm and ranch lifestyle and the rodeo lifestyle go hand in hand. As my dad grew up on our family ranch, he learned to calf rope. I believe one of my brothers has the buckle that he won when he was in his youth. But let me be very clear, the animals that are used in the rodeo life, like the bulls and the horses, and even the steers, are very well taken care of. In some cases, these bulls are worth millions of dollars. When the bulls are not doing their job, making an effort to buck someone off, they're living the good life. They're being very well fed, and they're most certainly not being abused. There's a story about an old saddle bronc horse that functioned as a saddle bronc late into his 20s. The bottom line is these animals are not abused in any way to get them to do what they do. And we love the rodeo life, and we'll most certainly be there next year to enjoy the small town rodeo again.
This is Callie's cat, Willow. I call her Mama because a couple weeks ago, even though we live in the middle of nowhere, a male cat made his way onto our property, found Willow, and we think she's due around July 19th. So we'll have some kitties here quick. Oreo cannot have any more kitties. She got fixed.
We're pretty sure a couple of days ago Willow had her kitty somewhere and we can't find them.
We've been on the hunt, watching where she goes. She comes down to the house and gets food and water, and we're pretty sure there's 4 kitties nursing on her, but we cannot find where she hid her kitties. So this is like day 3 on the hunt, so hopefully we find them pretty quick. Did you find them?
Well, I can hear them.
What's that?
I don't want one. Well, I heard her growl and then I heard a bunch of tiny meows. And she's on the wood. Over here somewhere. I can't. I need a flashlight. It's in here.
Okay, we gotta be really careful. Let me get in there. Okay, I'm gonna get on this end. Oh, what a pain. Oh, there she is, right there.
You got her?
I can see her. Oh, there she is.
Do you need a flashlight?
Yes. Hi, Willow. Hi, kitty, kitty, kitty.
Wait, did you guys like follow her up?
Come on.
Did you guys follow her up? I followed
Callie
her.
did.
Yep, there they are.
Yes!
Okay, take her. Take her.
Oh!
One, okay, hold them, Cal. Boy,
Can you?
2,
I can't.
3.
Do you think these are like a couple days old? Wait, don't hold it by
Come
its
on.
neck.
Come on, honey. Cedar, hold her. Here. Somebody hold her.
I don't wanna. Is there any more?
Okay. Didn't need it. Okay, 4.
I
Okay.
think that's it.
No, we're
want
gonna
me to
take them
hold
down
her?
to the house. Yeah, hold her. Take them down to the little house, little thing I built for them.
Oh, yeah, she doesn't want anything to do with me.
As much as I would like to be working on the roof, on the house, I've got to get this fencing completely finished up so I can stop worrying about it. The price of hay is still as high as I've ever seen it. And by putting the goats up here on the hillside, they will in fact help the grass come in. Goats prefer weeds over grass. So as we let the goats chew down the weeds and expose the grass, over time the grass should come in thicker. The plan is to have both sides of the hillside fenced into two separate pastures so I can move the goats back and forth as I need to, letting the grass grow back once it does get chewed down. The problem is I can see the projects are stacking up and I may not get to the other hillside this summer. I talked about this before, but I bought about 100 of these 4-inch pressure-treated posts from a local family that was trying to raise some money for their son. Had I used T-posts, it would have gone much faster and probably lasted longer, but I felt good buying those posts, helping that family out, and more than likely I'll go back and buy some more to do the other side of the hill when that time comes. I'm using the same goat fencing that I used around the front yard, and it's about 4 feet tall, and the holes down at the bottom of the fencing is tighter than the holes at the top, and this seems to make a big difference with the goats. In my mind, our property is better suited for goats and maybe sheep than it will ever be for cows. If at some point down the road we manage to get rid of all the weeds and we have nothing but field hay growing up in place, then maybe we could put a couple of cows up on the hill. But in my opinion, as much of a pain as the goats can be at times, I would much rather deal with goats than cows. The small town life, especially in a western farming and ranching community, in my opinion, is the best possible place where Cedar and I could live and we could raise our family. There is a work ethic in these communities that has a tendency to be contagious. It's required to succeed. On top of that, I've never met a farmer that didn't exert some sort of faith during the process of planting a seed, praying for the proper amounts of rain and sunlight, watching a crop grow that could potentially feed his community, then most of the time just barely getting by and doing that year after year after year. It's a beautiful lifestyle that is often very family-oriented, and most farms and ranches around us are multi-generation farms. That's about the only way it works in this day and age. While it's not likely that we'll ever be able to produce enough here on our place to actually make a living off of it, but there are some things that interest me. specifically around raising a very particular livestock that we may be able to sell to help pay for the expenses of raising that livestock. Right now we have the obvious goats, but there's a few other things out there that I think would fit in perfectly here. Occasionally, I find myself on the internet looking at a very particular type of sheep that may bring a higher value at maturity. These are the things that I regularly think about as we continue to develop our property and try and make the best out of what we have to work with. Could we raise enough merino sheep to sell the wool and be profitable in the process? I've talked about this before, but my grandfather and his two brothers had somewhere between 2,000 and 3,000 sheep at one time. While this is cattle country, it's also sheep country. And I would love to figure out a family business that as the kids get older, they can help with.
All that I've got left now is to staple the fence to all of the pressure treated posts. These are the staples I like to use. I think they're 1.25 inch staple. We got a good rain last night that kind of ruined my afternoon as far as getting work done, but it was a perfect rain because it didn't come down too hard too fast, and it rained for a good couple of hours. And I think there's some rain coming in this evening, but it's a beautiful day. I think it's a high of mid-80s. But tonight is our annual rodeo, and Cedar's got tickets, and we're gonna go later and wander around at the fair and watch the rodeo. And so my goal for today is to try and get this fence completely nailed off, and then I have to stretch a piece of a roll of wire down the far side where there's currently 5-string barbed wire, because my goats can push right through the barbed wire. So I've got to roll that side down, wire that side up, and then a little small piece across the back, and then I can get the goats up here and move on to bigger and better things. The issue is I have a couple of conflicting things. The roof now on the house, I'm trying to decide if I should even take it off this week because the weather's bad. And next week, at the end of next week, I'm gonna have Brian from Lion Energy and a couple other guys up here to help me basically double the capacity of my battery bank and my inverters. And I need to move the water heater, the tankless water heater, from one wall to the other wall to give adequate room for that those new batteries. Once we upgrade that battery bank, that's it, we're done. In theory, I could add one more inverter and even more batteries to that system, up to 3 inverters, but we don't need that much. Adding one more inverter and 2 more batteries is basically the icing on the cake. That's going to guarantee that on those short winter days when we don't get enough sun, that we have more than sufficient battery to keep the generator from the new generator, which I also have to get installed before it gets too cold, but basically to go as long as we can in between using the generator. So anyway, I want to get this fencing finished so the goats can kind of live their lives up here, and all we have to do is give them some water. So I'm going to start at the bottom, and I'm going to work my way up and progressively kind of tighten the fence as I go.
These 4-inch pressure treated posts that I've used to support the fence are anywhere from 8 to 9 feet long. And part of the reason I prefer to use them is that if we ever needed to go taller with the fencing, we could with these existing poles. There are some sheep and goats that could easily jump a 4-foot fence. So if we do decide to branch out into something else, whether it be sheep or a different type of goat, we have the poles in place to use for that fencing. Come on. This is what Ruby looks like after going on a 20-hour excursion in the mountains around our house.
Come on, here and go potty.
As I said before, we tried desperately not to let her and Bandit out together, because once they get out together, they take off and go for a long run. When they get back, they are visibly worn out, and in some cases, it's obvious that they've lost weight.
Is it warm, Bandit?
Nah, it's kind of cold. Wait. Look.
Take me back to the old dirt road where Mama and Papa used to go. Let's sing all them songs from a long time ago and pine for them old days of yore. Well, let me run through the breeze like the leaves on the trees. Let me fly like the leaves when they fall. Well, let my mind go serene like a cool water stream that runs from the mountain so tall. Oh, take me back down the old dirt road. Take me home to rest where the mockingbirds nest and to cry through the green in the spring. Let's go back a ways to the old bygone days the simple time we lived back when. Well, let the pull of the plow bring the sweat from my brow, and the glow of the fire pull me home. Let me wind down my days in the sweet dusty haze. Take me back down the old dirt road. Oh, take me back down the old dirt road. Take me back down the old dirt road.
We've used everything from shock collars to electric fencing, and it still doesn't matter. If somebody happens to accidentally open a door and they get out together, they're often gone for a minimum of 4 hours, and sometimes as long as 24 hours. We know it's dangerous and obviously physically hard on them, and we're trying to figure out how best to keep this from happening. I think we will end up putting in some sort of a fence around the front yard where we can let them out, let them run around, but there's no way for them to run off. We've even considered keeping them outside while the weather's still warm and letting them decide if they want to run off day after day after day, hoping that they would give up on this idea. But I worry too much about what could happen to them, so this doesn't seem to be a likely option. Hopefully, as Ruby gets a little older, I can continue to work with her and get her trained well enough where she stays right close by me wherever I happen to be. That's the long-term goal, but she's a free spirit, and it's hard to keep her inside when I know she wants to be outside. When I'm working on the fencing, I put a railroad tie at every corner, and I put that railroad tie as deep in the ground as I possibly can, over 3 feet usually. Once I backfill and compact around that railroad tie, I can stretch the fence from corner to corner, getting the fencing as tight as it needs to be so it not only looks good, but so it's also functional. I have found that using these railroad ties on the corner makes a big difference. As our little goat herd continues to get bigger and bigger, Cedar has asked that I build a bigger shelter for the goats, as the little shelter that I built a couple of years back is just not big enough anymore. When we have these afternoon rain and thunderstorms, it's obvious the goats don't want to be out in the weather when this is happening. I'll have to find some time to build some sort of nice shelter for them that's not only a rain cover, but also a windbreak. So as we get into cooler weather, they can have a nice shelter to get out of the elements. Now that the fencing is almost completely finished, I need to get back on the house. The next big project that will happen next week on the house is all around our solar system. We will be adding 2 more batteries and 1 more inverter to our solar system. The Lion Energy system that we currently have is stackable, which means you can add on to the system. We could, in theory, have as many as 3 inverters and 9 batteries, but we don't need this much. Having 5 batteries and 2 inverters will be more than sufficient for our needs. So this next week, I have to relocate the tankless water heater, get the utility room cleaned out and ready for the new inverter and the 2 new batteries. The second that is done, we will dive right back into the roof, getting the second story corrugated tin removed and the R panel installed. Then I will start the process of relocating the solar panels from the ground to the house.
Okay, the fence is all done up on top of the hill, so now we're gonna move the goats up there to give them a little more space. This white goat, she's pretty friendly, she likes me, and it looks like we're taking her for a walk like a dog on a leash. But after last night being around that bull, I would much rather herd all these goats than deal with those bulls. So
we're gonna try to take, Cedar wants to take them one at a time up there. I want to hog tie all of them, throw them in the back of the Ranger and take them up there. We're gonna try and walk her up there. She's kind of the herd matriarch. Let her baby follow and see if anybody else follows, but I'm afraid it might turn into a mess. So let's see what happens.
Bribe them with a little bit of treats.
Do you want to get some sweet feed
Oh,
too,
they
or
ate
no?
it all yesterday, remember?
Oh.
So we're just gonna have to give them some hay.
So just walk her up there and I guess walk her towards the gate and see what happens. Okay, Cal. Come on. Okay, take her up in there.
Oh, they're coming. Oh no.
Stay right there, Cal. Good girl. Get up. Close it. Need help getting that off? They're already just going crazy.